Okay, so now in this session, what we're going to do is we're going to continue talking about STEEP, and the next E, or the next letter that we need to get into, is the E for Ecological Trends. Okay, so what we're talking about there with ecological trends is it's the environmental factors, which can include ecological and environmental aspects such as the weather, climate. We're looking at climate change specifically, that can specifically or especially affect our industries such as tourism, farming and insurance. If you're in tourism and you're a beachside resort, obviously, what happens with weather patterns is going to affect you. During the summer, you'll have heaps of people. In winter, not so much. If you're selling ice cream, once again, winter is going to be not necessarily your best month. On the other hand, if you're a coffee shop, you'll do a great trade in winter, but in summer, maybe not so much, because not everyone wants to go down and get a nice hot cup of coffee on a 43-degree Sydney day. So that's going to change those things up a little bit, and we need to start to think about how that's going to affect our business and what patterns that's going to start to form. There's also a growing awareness of potential impacts of climate change. Okay, so as things are evolving, it's having quite an effect across a lot of industries, crops, beachside, etc. So there's quite a lot of those weather patterns start to affect a lot of the industries there, and we need to start to think about that because it is becoming an issue, and obviously people are starting to become very aware and starting to think about, well, how's that going to affect us? What it does do though is it does, as part of that, create new markets. At the same time, it does destroy old ones. So we need to start thinking about, well, what impact, if I'm going to be undertaking activity, what impact is it going to have on me, and where am I going to take it? Now, the growing importance of environmental or ecological factors, obviously there is that wider consumer concern about what's going on and what is happening globally, and that's created really a sort of on the grand scheme, it's not really a new thing, but it is the green market. Okay, so that's green businesses and businesses that take that into account. On the grander landscape, they've only been around for the last 20 odd years. But they've obviously become a really large thing, and people are starting to look at that more closely. One of the things that we're going to look at is we're going to look at energy consumption. So some things we want to know about is how much energy do we consume? Okay, and part of the energy consumption is whether it's sustainable renewable energy sources. That becomes a question there, and how that interfaces. We also need to think about the pollution that we produce. Okay, so what pollution or what are we putting back out there? What about our byproducts? Okay, so while we're producing our goods and services, what impact is that having? What sort of footprint? We need to think about our raw material. Okay, so raw materials can be a bit of an issue. Obviously weather patterns change and it starts to affect the availability, and also thinking about our consumer support. Okay, so the consumer support for environmentally friendly products and services. So that's obviously been an enduring part. The things that we start to look at really is we start to think about, well, what are the impacts? We start thinking about the energy that we produce. Obviously that's becoming a bit of a concern to the local environment. We look at wind farms, solar, tidal, etc. are becoming more of a thing. They become a greater argument point. People want to know that the footprint is being reduced. The byproducts of pollution. The consumers are becoming aware, and they don't like businesses that just continually pollute. It becomes a big thing on Facebook. It becomes a big thing on social media, and people are certainly starting to ask questions. So when you're thinking about your business, that actually becomes a point of difference to a lot of companies that can't talk to that or can't justify their position. So it's certainly something to think about, and thinking about what impact are you having first and foremost, and then second, what is going to be the perception of your market if you don't think about those things, because obviously sustainability has become an issue there to make sure that those materials are there for the long term, and you can go from continue to manufacture or do your trade. Okay, so when we start to look at that, we start to look at energy consumption as being the first big thing that they're going to look at. And when we talk about energy consumption, well, the global population is continually increasing. Okay, there's more and more people, they're using more energy. That obviously starts to have a bit of a drain on resources. Okay, and it's hitting businesses in two main areas, and the first one is impact and cost. Okay, now when we talk about the impact, what we're talking about there is the customers become more environmentally conscious, And if you're always using heaps and heaps of power, you start to be seen as a bit of a, ungreen, okay? Okay, so, you become environmentally unfriendly and you actually become a bit of a target for criticism. People want to know, well, why aren't you taking that seriously? So companies that try and reduce their energy consumption actually get a lot of traction with customers. They can actually advertise the fact, people are prepared to pay a premium. Things like, reduced impacts for travel particularly. So you start to see airline tickets where they actually talk about becoming more carbon neutral. Okay, we think about costs as well. The hardline business reality is it's also a business cost is energy, and that's continually going up. Over the last little while, it's risen by about 10% in Australia. So, that's going to have an ongoing effect. The more money that you require, or the more energy you're using, the more money that's going to end up costing you, which is going to have an absolute impact on your bottom line. So how you either cut back the energy or find ways to create it, solar power, etc., for your business, or reducing your footprint as an initial move, that becomes a bit of a good tip. All right, we start to think about also the businesses will try to do whatever they can to really try and cost save. And those green initiatives, look, they just make perfect sense. You're doing the right thing by your customers. The customers want to see you reduce your energy footprint and the environmental impact that therefore has. It's good business sense for you because obviously you're saving money as well. And it's also the right thing to do from a decent ethical standpoint. The next thing we need to think about is our pollution monitoring. And when we're looking at that is we're trying to protect the environment from the adverse effects of pollution. Okay, there's quite a lot of countries out there which, we now have legislation talking about, how much pollution you can put out, and also thinking about, preferential treatment for those that can start to mitigate that pollution level. Okay, companies may voluntarily try and monitor their outputs, okay, or they may have to by law. And we have things, carbon tax, etc., or carbon trading. That's become a thing in the last while. Obviously, the governments are starting to legislate just how much pollution you can make and really take a forward step on that. So once again, if you're starting a business or thinking about where your business goes, getting onto that early is probably a good point before you get legislated against, but also just to have a good hard think about what you want to go forward with. Technologies have improved that. There are ways to really cut that down. So think about reducing waste, because once again with waste, it's just money that you're throwing away most of the time. Okay, so that covers gas emissions as well as the rubbish you throw out, your packaging, the actual byproducts of what you're making, what you're putting into the water. Once you've, if you're a car wash, how much stuff you're washing away, how many chemicals go down the drain. Okay, that all starts to become a bit of an issue. Once again, reuse, reduce, and recycle. Okay, so in order to cut those costs, companies really try to, encourage those reduce, reuse, recycle policies where possible. Turning off lights, all those sort of things, not throwing out too much garbage, reusing paper, making sure that it goes to appropriate places. Your old toner cartridges can be collected and recycled. Making sure that your e-waste is collected appropriately. Okay, these things become a real issue, and sometimes you can actually get money for them as well, which is an even bigger boon. With regards to your raw material supply, okay, commodity prices have a major impact on your business. If you can't get reasonably priced raw material, that's going to have an impact. Okay, so things like the 1973 oil crisis were quite a big deal. The price of oil quadrupled. On a more domestic market, we had a few cyclones in Queensland, and the price of a banana went from $1.99 to a kilo. They ended up at close to about $15 a kilo from memory. So bananas were literally worth their weight in gold. In fact, I think gold might have been cheaper. So that's what happens here is that, you get a tropical cyclone comes through, it can wipe out your fruit supply, which is not so funny if you rely on those fruits and vegetables in order to run your business, because that's going to have a huge impact. And it can just be cyclones start picking up. If we start to see different weather patterns emerge, we start to see more and more of those events happen, and then you get a lot of crops wiped out. Particularly here in Australia, that agricultural bent, we can be very exposed in that regard. Okay, so that's that simple stuff. But if you can't get hold of your other raw materials, latex, iron ore, wood, precious metals, etc., those things can become a bit of an issue. So what you need to start thinking about is, well, where can I get those materials from a reliable and stable source? Okay, can't always be done. Obviously, weather patterns, etc., start to come in. you get everything in, some countries from civil war, etc. You also get, unethically sourced items. So you have to really check that out, because if all of a sudden you get exposed as buying something from, something that involved child labour or slave labour or anything like that, it's going to have a massive impact on you, and consumers are really going to balk. Once again, be on the right foot of that, take the ethical principle before the customers find you. It's do the right thing in the first place and you won't really have a problem. Okay, so, there is the general consumer support for the green products and services. Okay, as we say, in each one of these, I've sort of pointed out, if you do the wrong thing, the customers are going to be really angry. But what we're going to do is we're going to get on the front foot. We're going to be fairly ethical businesses, and we're going to make sure that we're doing the right thing by our customers and making sure we're doing the right thing by the environment. And what we're seeing there in the past decade is we're starting to see the real harnessing of consumer support and consumer power to affect positive environmental change. Okay, it is an issue. It's going to be an ongoing issue. It's not going to go away. And at the same time, the consumers are going to support and even demand that their products are made sustainably and ethically. So there are the green consumer movements in the US. That is more a global thing. It's not just reduced to the US. It is a global impact. We're starting to see the local support, shop locally, sustainable products becoming a real trend, and that won't be changing away. Okay. There was at the start, there's always going to be a bit of a trade-off, but just how much are people prepared to pay? Historically, sometimes that has been a little bit weak, but we are seeing continual movement towards things like, your fair trade, okay, and sustainably or locally sourced product. Okay, so that is certainly there. It is a point that you can market on. It does create you as a point of difference, and if you can get on the right side of that, the market will support you. Okay, so when you're looking at the overall trends, start to look at your energy use or your proposed energy use. Start looking at, how can we offset that, or how can we reduce it? It's going to save you money. It's going to reduce your impact. That's going to create goodwill from your consumers. Okay, have a think about the pollution that you're creating. Not just the obvious stuff of how much you're flushing away or how much you're burning as far as smoke, but also think about what happens to your water supply, how much rubbish is coming out, because all that ends up in landfill or gets burnt off, which is even worse. Have a think about your raw material. What are the trends going to do as far as your raw materials? Is there going to be an impact there as well? And start to think about your consumer report. Okay, this is consumer support. This has a great deal of value, and there are a lot of businesses that really stake their claim on being different and being thought leaders in these areas. So if you can get involved in that, that will certainly put you in good stead with your customers and give you a really good point of difference that will actually also be worth something to you. Get those consumers, send out the good message, stay on the front foot with that, and think about how everything from weather patterns to geography is going to affect you, and you should do all right. Thank you.